it ever gets to the planning commission.
I mean, I love it.
How the issue, any issue about sinkholes gets to the planning commission. I can't find it here since it says the Board of Zoning Appeals has the lead on it.
Be part of your review of a site plan or a
Site
plat.
plan.
Mark,
Okay.
Frida needs you.
Oh, no, it's going to be here.
No, he's not.
Okay,
I think
and-
this is probably it.
And Drew?
I think he's not going to be here either.
Okay.
He wasn't sure, but
Okay.
I think he's probably not going to make it.
I want to call the September 21st, 2017 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. We'll start out with citizen forum. First of all, we have a scout with us tonight. We always like you to come up and tell us what badge you're working on and your troop number. At the microphone, please.
My name's Daniel McPartlin. I'm from Troop 125, currently a Life Scout working on my communications merit badge. Requirement 7, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Good, thank you.
Does anybody, citizens forum, anybody have any questions or comments that don't relate to any of the items on the agenda tonight? If we do, we can ask at this point. Anybody on the planning commission have any questions or comments? Mark, I think you have somebody you can introduce.
Did you talk about our new planner?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Most of y'all have already met him, but I haven't introduced him formally. But Zachary Bonham, he started about 3 weeks ago. So he's from Virginia, went to Emory and Henry.
Battle.
So we've already gotten him introduced to the town and property maintenance stuff, and he's doing a good job. So we're certainly glad to have him. I think he's going to
Thanks a lot. We appreciate that.
be a good addition. So
I think those of us who have already talked to him would agree with that.
I want to make a reminder, if any of y'all attended that property rights, if you can make me a copy or something of your certificate, I'll keep that so I can keep track of your training hours, because that was 2 hours of training.
And you said the training hours are calendar year.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Then we'll move along to the approval of the agenda.
Any changes? Move to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes for the August 17th, 2017 meeting. Do we have any changes with that?
Move to approve?
Second. That's Betty.
Betty.
All those in favor?
Abstain.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a request for a variance from the distance from the intersection and distance between driveway requirements in the driveway and other accessways ordinance in association with the request right-in, right-out access on Concord Road for the property referenced as parcel 37.03, tax map 153, 4.68 acres, zone NC, Knox County. John and Sarah Malin, applicant.
Okay, this is, try to explain this as background, but Concord Road, the actual right-of-way of Concord Road is in the town of Farragut, though parts of the properties, the parcels on part of the east side of Concord Road are in Knox County. They're not in the town limits. So, as you all know probably by now, state of Tennessee is getting ready to work on an improvement project of Concord Road from Turkey Creek Road to North Shore to the roundabout. And as part of that project, they're trying to, provide for the curb cuts, that they would anticipate on that corridor. So what the applicant is requesting at this time is to obtain a right-in, right-out access onto Concord Road so that they can coordinate that here early in the process with TDOT. The site plan, don't get too concerned about that. First of all, we won't have any real input on the site plan because it will be in Knox County. It'll be handled through their MPC. but really just focus on that access point that they're requesting, with the understanding that that site plan is very preliminary, though the access, I think, is generally where they would like to have it. Concord Road is classified as a major arterial, so in the town's requirements, they have to have 400 feet between access points. This proposed access point is about 310 feet from the second drive access and to the south, and about 380 feet to where potentially an access would be to the north. So they are requesting a variance from that 400-foot distance from intersection and distance between driveways requirement that's in our driveways and other access ways ordinance. As you can see on this drawing, the property can be accessed from Second Drive to the south, and then, of course, it could be accessed to the north if the county were to require, which they should, a connection to the north whenever that property is developed, so that you can come out to this access point here. And that's actually where the First Utility District access is to their wastewater treatment facility. So, the property does have access without the need for a variance. That's something that y'all need to think about, because one concern I had was, they're going to have a sidewalk on that side of Concord Road after this improvement project. So anytime you add a curb cut, you create a potential conflict point between a vehicle and a pedestrian. And you also can establish a potential precedent to where you may have others that request curb cuts along this corridor. That kind of compromises the town's goal of spacing out the access points, and that's why we have the 400 feet on our arterial streets. As you know, from your packet, the town engineer had some comments on this, and one thing that we wanted to be very clear about is that if you do grant a right-in, right-out access, that it be clear that the town in no way at this point or in the future would consider approving a curb cut to that median, that raised median that would be part of the road improvement project. That's an important element of this corridor. We want to soften the street. We've talked about that a lot, and have green space within the public street. And it's very important. We're going to have decorative street lighting along that section, so we want it to have a kind of a warm, inviting feel. So we want to be very clear that there would be no cut ever allowed in this median, and they're not requesting that. But we think if you do, if you're okay with the requested access, that be specifically part of your motion. The town engineer also, as you all know from looking at site plans that come before the town, would also recommend a deceleration lane into the property so that people that are entering the site can get out of the flow of traffic, and you have less of a potential for a rear-end collision. So that raised median, as you can see here, it comes through that portion of the property. So we would definitely want to keep that in place as a very key part of this road improvement project. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Robert Campbell if y'all have some questions, and
I've got a
maybe
question with
he
you
can
first.
talk about his justification for the access.
Where would the deceleration, how would that fit in?
Well, and it's probably something they need to think about now anyway, because it'd be cheaper to provide for it. You might have to move utilities if you don't do it now. So you'd be coming down. You'd have it somewhere here where you can get out of the flow of traffic as you're turning into this property. And as you all know, we require that of developments that come before us. In fact, I don't recall when we haven't required it in recent years, at least, with site developments, because it just provides for a better flow of traffic and less potential for accidents.
have a question. You mentioned possible access from the north. Where
Yeah.
would you anticipate that might be?
Well, and that's all somewhat out of the town's control, but hopefully the county would require a cross access like we do with developments, so that, you know, if you're on this parcel, you can get out to here. So they're showing a curb cut here. And then you can also, of course, come down here on Second Drive to get out on the south end.
There's a light there, isn't there, at the, no, is it
No,
Father?
there's not a lot at any
Turkey
of that.
Creek.
There's only a lot at Turkey Creek Road.
Okay.
Yep.
We did not also require an acceleration lane.
Don't typically require an acceleration lane. We only a deceleration lane.
Do you know if they're going to have a deceleration lane at Second Drive?
Robert could probably speak to that. I believe not, because that was one of his points in his justification for the access. Now, I don't know that to be true because I'm not familiar with TDOT's project here, but he probably is, and he could probably answer that.
Okay, can you give us your name?
Yes.
And
Sorry about that. Robert Campbell, 7523 Taggart. Mark is correct, and what you see up there is basically the proposed layout plan that's part of the Concord Road, right-of-way / construction documents. And the question was, is there an XL lane or decel lane required at Second Drive? And you see, hopefully you can see where the curb comes around in a normal radius. There is no XL or decel lane coming off of Second Drive, nor is there one over here on the crossroad that's down on the southern side of Concord Road. Typically, those XL decel lanes, if you go down 4-lane roads, if you have a curb and gutter section with a shoulder, which you're going to have a bike lane and you're going to have a pretty wide section in there, that turn is made fairly easily without that XL decel lane. Our point on this is we're asking for a curb cut. While Concord Road, while it's under construction, TDOT's already approved their traffic office and their construction office have approved our request for a curb cut, but it's in your right of way. So here we are to talk to you about that. Our concern with a couple things, number one, our access off of Second Drive. There's a sinkhole that's in that area. It's possible, not necessarily, I'm not saying this is exactly what there is, but it's possible based on where that sinkhole location is that access may be a difficult thing to get coming off of there. Again, depending on what location that is and what the limits of that sinkhole end up being, that could create an issue, which leaves us potentially landlocked, which we would, at that point, if we were landlocked, would be able to get on some level, legal access off of Concord Road. So it makes sense for us to do that now rather than later. The other thing about having the entrance to the north would be a super thing to do, but that's somebody else's property, and we can't assume that somebody else is going to let us have access across their property. I mean, we would hope that would be the case. We think that we agree with Mark that would make a great cross connector, but we can't assume that because, again, it has to have a willing buyer, a willing seller, because the Malins don't have the right of eminent domain to make that connection happen. So again, while the project's under construction, we're asking for this curb cut. You see the proposed development in front of you, and again, that's just something we put on paper to kind of try to get things. That's going to be several years, and I have the Malins here, and they can speak to that, but it's nothing that's imminent. It's just something we kind of wanted to look at to somewhat locate what was going on. I would suggest the better time to decide anything about turning lanes and anything about the other restrictions that may be there would be when we have a traffic impact type study based on exactly what goes here. If we have something that's a tremendously low generator of traffic, if it's not in peak times, and there are all kinds of factors that go along, so why go put that in now at a cost that may or may not be warranted, justified, or needed? And so we're We're simply asking, while we're under construction, let's put a curb cut there. We've got right-in and right-outs. We 100% agree that we're not going to ask for a cut across the median. It just makes no sense. You don't want to turn across a left turn lane. Yeah, that's just, that's not good. Makes good sense. And so we wouldn't ask for that. But anyway, those are our points. We think that actually moving some of the traffic away from the intersection that's not signalized, by the way, 2nd Street will not be signalized. That way you allow some of the cars to take a ride and relieve some of the potential backup that may be happening on 2nd, so that you don't end up with having to wait for traffic to clear before your pedestrians go, and then somebody, if traffic is backed up, not paying attention because I've been sitting here for 5 minutes and it's not gone and I'm going to make a run for it. And that lets some of that right traffic get on out of the development. And again, if it were signalized, we may be having a different discussion, but that intersection is not going to be signalized, and it's not got a dedicated right turn lane. It's just a straight in, straight out. There's no dedicated lane for people to get over and kind of make that work as they go. So anyway, those are our reasons. We think it makes good sense. We think with a 700-something foot long, 20-foot long piece of property with right-ins and right-outs, it certainly makes good sense. And then you all have the opportunity later, as we kind of flesh out what this site looks like in a few years, because the construction's probably going to begin in 9 months to a year, maybe. I'm trying to go to the number, and it'll last like every roadway project does, 2 to 2.5 years. And so we're probably not looking at doing anything for quite a while. So I'll shut up. I know I've probably blabbered too much.
Robert, on parcel 36, I know it's a separate parcel, but it looks like, is that another curb cut? It looks to me like it's too far north to be for the old gas station. It's on the far, it's at the match line almost, on the right-hand side.
That may be an old driveway, but I can't.
I mean, I'm looking at the aerial photograph, and it's,
Yeah, but that doesn't
really show anything.
Yeah, I think there is a curb cut there, but it's all the way across, which is, pretty close to that road is at the same point, so. Yeah, that does look like an old driveway. I didn't even notice that.
I'm just looking at a number of curb cuts
Yes, sir.
in that area.
Mr. Campbell, I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
regarding the sinkhole there near the Second Creek access point. How restrictive is that sinkhole? Could the access point be relocated on down below where it is now
What?
or above it?
I'm sorry, I jumped in front of you. I'm sorry. Maybe. And here's why. You don't want to put that access point coming off the Second Drive too close to the intersection. Again, if you have traffic that backs up 3 or 4 cars, you have people trying to get out of that entranceway that may never be able, well, not ever, but it's hard for them to get out. So we would want to locate that drive as far to the northeast as we possibly could. And again,
On the property line now?
well, we're in about the middle of the property line. The property line is at the very rear, kind of where if you see the blue, it's almost touching the blue back in the back.
That's her sister.
There's yes, thank you.
Sarah's the other.
So we could go back a little further, but the further we get back, we have a bad reversing curve situation, and you can take a road across the sinkhole, but there's some risk, especially going across the edges. We may be okay, but when you go through the middle of one, it's really not a good situation to be in. So we're just, again, that may not be a concern once we get out and do some geotechnical. We may be perfectly fine doing what this is drawn up, but then again, we may not, and we just don't want to. Well, then we come back to you and say here in a few years, oh, by the way, that sinkhole is a bad thing, and this is the only real access we have to the property. So trying to get it done while the whole world's under construction out there.
Mark, did you say that we would have no input, the Farragut Planning Commission would have no input at all on the 2nd Street or the other street requiring that to be used as entrances and exits?
Well, I mean, we would have some input on the access, yeah.
From a development, not on Concord Road, but from these side streets.
Not, well, what, we wouldn't have any control over directly whether the county or the MPC requires them to have a cross access so that they come out to the north at a planned curb cut. So we wouldn't have any way to require that. Hopefully they would require that. 'Cause it's, makes good sense and for a number of reasons, but the only thing we really have direct control over is a new curb cut request onto that road.
Anybody?
Is there still some uncertainty exactly where the curb cut would be? Since everything's so preliminary and you're trying to get the cart before the horse here.
Well, yeah, in some ways, yes, but wherever it's going to be is wherever we're going to have to deal with it. I mean, that's part of the thing because we really don't know. We've tried to kind of split it in the middle of the property, and I think that gives us kind of maximum flexibility back and forth. So, again, trying to get it done now while it's still under construction, we think helps make that curb cut a little easier. But yes, you're right. I mean, there is a little bit of risk if it gets developed in the future that may not be, but it's going to have to be in that place. I mean, that's just where it's going to have to be. Fortunately, property's rectangular enough that we've got some pretty good options, it looks like, when we come to develop it as far as being able to shift things left or right slightly and do some other things. So.
But if we didn't restrict the number of feet, you could possibly even get it below 300 feet from the existing access, couldn't you? Your curb cut could be closer to Second Drive rather, than 310 feet. Is that right?
I think this is the 380 here.
It says to the north.
Yeah, I think that might
380
be
is the nearest
reversed.
access to the north. That's this way, isn't it?
It does look closer to the north,
It
doesn't
looks
it?
closer
Yeah.
to this.
Yeah, it's closer to the north as
It
a
looks
bits
closer
of
to this than it does
scale.
to that.
Well, it
Reverse
does,
that.
but
Transfer
that's,
some-
but that's not
Is
what
that,
the
is it,
Yes.
narrative
is it
says.
380 to the south and
I
310
think
to
that,
the
yes, ma'am,
north?
that is correct. I got my north and south messed up, but yes.
So this narrative is wrong?
Yeah, I think it is. I
This
think
is
I made a
380
mistake
and that's
on that.
310.
Yeah.
All right, so we need to reverse these numbers then.
Yeah.
So being that it's right in, right out, do you like that it's further from Second Drive with a right in, right out? Is that preferable that it's 380, as close to 400 feet as possible from that direction? Because they won't be pulling out in the other direction.
Yeah.
Which one's the bigger?
Second drive would have more vehicles on it.
Yes.
'Cause
That was our thought, is that you're coming out of Second Drive again, building up speed, and a little bit further would help you rather than being a little closer. That
Yeah,
was,
because it goes further back to the east than where this drive would onto the north, because it would just go to the parcel limit there. So yeah, it'd probably be better to be further away from Second Drive.
So what do we need to do to assure that's the situation, since
Well,
these
you-
numbers are,
Yeah. You can put some kind of limitation on it that it has to be at least so many feet from Second Drive. I mean, you could do that.
Yeah, I think probably.
Maybe
that's
360 feet or something. That would give them 20 feet of, but, it really, that's part of and that was one thing Darrell pointed out in his recommendation. It's kind of a little preliminary to do this, because normally when you grant these kind of variances, you have a specific number. So it's a little bit unusual. I understand we're kind of at the mercy a little bit of the state, and things we might not know yet, but that's the whole point, is it might be a little bit preliminary to know
It's not
exactly.
pinned down. Is the state going to go along with including it as part of the
I
construction?
guess my
I mean,
question
you gotta
would
put-
be,
It's going to have to physically be put somewhere.
what did the
yes, sir,
state
we've
approve?
already got it approved by them to be part of the construction project.
So I guess whatever the
an
state
entrance
has
permit we've got
approved
approved
would
by
be
them.
what I would refer to. If they've already approved a curb cut, then that's what you ought to use.
And
I
they've
guess.
approved it at
So I
380
assume
feet?
that's what you're
Yes.
showing here.
Actually, I think it was a little bit less than that. I think we moved it slightly based on some of the comments that you all had about just wanting the radiuses and different things. So I think we have moved it slightly from where they are, but they were good with it basically in the middle of the property, which was 320 feet or 40 feet or something like that.
That seems like
I'm at
it should be
360
What do we
feet.
approve?
That makes me
Yeah,
more comfortable.
330 feet
I need a specific number, huh?
from Second Drive.
I'm not comfortable doing anything without specific numbers if,
I would just go by the 380 then,
That's what
from
I would
Second Drive.
Kind of
Yeah.
where I am,
Okay.
too.
If they have to change it substantially, they need to come back.
Come back.
Agree?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Now,
too.
let me ask you this. I know that you've said it, but I probably need you to repeat it. Utilities on that side, we're going to have lights, what are we going to have? What kind of utilities are going to be on that side of?
Okay, I'm going to laugh because every utility in the world is in Concord Road. We just got done doing a 3D model of this, as a matter of fact, and trust me, everyone is there. There will be, I don't know that on this plan, I think there are shown a couple of signal poles that are there. There is the drainage that's shown. You're going to have water, sewer, gas, and exactly where that is, I'm not 100% sure. Again, part of the, and I'm glad you reminded me of that, but part of the reason to do it now is as they relocate these utilities, that way, when we go to dig a new entrance in, we're not risking getting down to where those utilities are. And I had that on my notes here and just blew past it. So thank you for reminding me of that. But that lets us cut down to the level of the road and not worry about getting down potentially where there may be another bank of utilities, because all the utilities pretty much on this road are going to be relocated during this project.
Well, what if we come back and realize that a decel lane will be needed? What will that do to?
Well, if you look, one of the good things about the 380, if the next set of catch basins is lined up at about the last S in spaces, where it says 16 spaces. So we're taking out a little bit of sidewalk and we're taking out a little bit of the curb, but we'll have room for some form of deceleration lane without getting to the catch basin that's there. And again, that is some cost, but if that's what if that's what's required based on what the development demands, then that's what we will end up doing. And deceleration lane, I understand the term, but it's not like, this is a deceleration lane, those tapers that are in the medians, and they're fairly long. I mean, they can be 200 and 300 feet. The ones that I've seen that you've primarily had and required have been those that have been somewhere between 50 to 100 feet, and they've kind of tapered in just to allow somebody to get off the road. And they've not really been a classic deceleration lane. So, but yes, that's.
What you may want to do is just reference as your motion the attachment, and that way your action is based on something that we can refer to, the drawing, with the understanding that the town engineer's recommendation, and which I would agree with, is that I think ultimately should have some type of a deceleration lane at some point, or taper or something.
So we're going to want to state in the motion that it's 380 feet from Second Drive, correct?
That would be what's shown on the attachment roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That it's right in, right out.
Right in, right out, no median cut. He does have that as a note up here too.
Okay.
This plan does not. I think it's note number 4. But that's fine. I would include it as part of your motion. That's just one thing you might want to consider, is just reference this attachment.
I think we want to reference note number 4, because that kind of leaves it open-ended. It's not anticipate, that doesn't mean it precludes it.
Which one are you talking about?
Well, I would just be clear in your motion that,
No,
I'd be more clear in the motion then.
exactly.
Yeah. Maybe the access location is as shown on attachment A, but as part of the motion, you may want to be clear about the median.
But I don't see on the attachment where it has 380, maybe it's on.
It doesn't. That's just scaled out with the scale.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we can state,
Well, I'd put that
state
380
those
in the
numbers.
motion,
Put that in the motion.
yeah. If you're gonna make it.
I'm going to try and make a motion.
Okay.
You guys help me along here. Move to approve Is it called a curb cut? Is that what we're calling it? Access location?
Be a variance to the
Variance,
driveways and other
okay.
access ways ordinance for
That's
distance from intersection and distance between driveways.
What he said.
Okay.
Access location at 380 feet from Second Drive. Do I need to outlay the rest of it, or is that the attachment A is sufficient?
310. you can
Note
do that
4.
too.
Note 4?
Well, yeah, just, yeah, if you want to be clear in your motion about
Mangled.
the median,
You
it's
have to
fine.
do the 310 as well, I think.
Then you go, you take a shot.
I move to approve the variance of 380 feet to the south to Second Drive and 310 north coincide with the entrance to the First Utility District property. And also to prove, predicated on the fact that there's to be no median cut now or in the future to accommodate that entrance.
Right in, right out.
Right, and it's also a right in and right out only.
Second.
Have you got all that, Mark?
Yeah.
It's not pretty, but.
So it was St. Clair and then Paulding. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Discussion and public hearing on a concept plan revision for the Bridgemore subdivision off at Fee Road, 282.97 acres, Zone R-1 OSR, Placemakers Number 2 Partnership applicant.
As we talked about last month when we were looking at the preliminary plat for Phase 3, everybody knows Bridgemore is a very big piece of property. It's being developed in phases. And so as required in our zoning ordinance, the property zone open space residential. And then also in the subdivision regulations, you have a concept plan you have to revisit periodically. It says at least every 2 years in the subdivision regulations. And basically since 2004, when the original concept plan was approved for the McPhee Farm, is what it was called then, this concept plan has been revisited periodically, almost on an annual basis in some cases. So last month, and actually in July, we had an applicant come before us with the concept plan for the property on the east side of McPhee Road that was up till now included as part of the Bridgemore subdivision. But that concept plan showed that apparently in 2007, the property on the east side of McPhee Road was sold to a different entity, and that's no longer part of the Bridgemore subdivision. In fact, it's been placed in a conservation easement limited to 10 house lots. That property on the east side has a lot of jurisdictional wetlands and floodplains, so that's probably not a bad thing for that area. But because they were using a lot of that area to count toward their open space for the Bridgemore concept plan, we asked them to go back and verify that the property that's now Bridgemore, which is everything on the west side of McPhee Road, can stand alone and meet all the requirements of the OSR zoning district, like the 35% open space, and ensuring that the walking trail connections and things are still provided for, particularly in that Phase 4, because that's the undeveloped part of Bridgemore, which is actually pretty substantial, the western part. In looking at their revised concept plan, they do provide 35.1%. I think Billy and Benny had got creative with some of the lots and had probably had a lot of fun with that. But they do meet that, and they also are showing a walking trail that, and this would be kind of an interesting one, that would be coming up the hill kind of in a switchback. And that was one that was kind of in lieu of, there was an old walking trail system that we've kind of taken out as part of Bridgemore 2 and 3 that kind of came through that drainage area. So this is kind of an alternative, probably a little bit better workout for sure, coming up that. So they're still providing all the walking trails that have been in the previous concept plans, and they still have this neat section, I think, back here in the northwest part. It's probably something similar to what's behind the town hall with the alley loaded, kind of Charleston type, houses and things like that. A little different look in the back. So hopefully that'll be retained as they move forward with doing something in that phase in the future. The only thing that and I think it's just probably a oversight, but when we were looking at phase 3, the preliminary plat, it's pretty much that area there. This concept plan shows a little bit of an area that comes around here that was part of that's shown as phase 3, but I'm not sure if that was your intention or not. That may be part of phase 4.
Yeah, originally, it's not part of phase 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
You may just want to merge that into phase 4.
right.
Is the only thing that we noticed. But other than that, it does meet the requirements, and that's what we were wanting to have demonstrated, because of the exclusion of the property on the east side of McPhee Road. So the staff would recommend approval of the revised concept plan.
Do we need to do anything about this area that's,
I would just have a subject to. That's an easy thing for him to take care of.
Part of the calculated open space?
Yeah, it'd be part of phase 4. He may need to change his tables a little if it wasn't already addressed in the phase 4 portion.
That's fine.
He'd probably end up doing that in more than one phase, I would imagine, but that's a big area.
Yeah.
What's left. But
Yeah, I'd say it will
for
be.
now, it's phase 4.
anybody have any questions or comments?
I just have a question of curiosity. It was what Mark had highlighted, this housing right up in the corner. I'm really intrigued by that, and I like to see that, and I think it's going to be a neat addition to Bridgemore. But I would love for us to pay a closer attention to how that develops, if it develops like that, for
nice.
possibly future zoning ordinance that would embrace this type of development, because I think that's a nice asset too. It provides a different type of housing, and that's what we're looking for.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us give us your name and business?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm Billy Fulgham with Fulgham McIndone Associates. I'm the civil engineer that's representing the developer.
And an address.
10330 Hardin Valley Road, Knoxville.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's neat. And they had a land planner did this layout, Doug Arnold from Franklin. That was one of the things he wanted to do, was kind of build in variety in lot sizes and arrangements of housing, so that you got, kind of like almost like Sequoia Hills on a smaller scale. If you go into Sequoia Hills, you got all kinds of different types of housing styles. You got apartments, you got huge mansions, you got little Cape Cod cottages. You kind of got a good mix of everything. So I think on a much smaller scale, that's what he was looking at trying to do here, which I think would be a great product personally.
I don't have any more questions.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Move for approval of the updated concept plan, subject to updating the concept plan to reflect that area and also the table.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on a site plan for the addition to the Farragut E&T building at 144 Concord Road, 1.4 acres, Zone C-1, Urban Engineering's applicant.
Thought that was Chris. He must be his brother.
Brother.
Look just like him. It's not a bad thing.
We get that a lot.
Anyway, the E&T building, as you all know, of course, it's existing about 8,000 square feet. They came before y'all in July for a requested 2,000 square foot addition, and I guess they figured that they needed more space, so they're coming back now for an additional 1,500 square feet for a total addition of 3,500 square feet. It's in that rear portion of the existing building. It really probably is not visible from anywhere, unless you're just back there, we're really looking for it from Concord Road. So when we looked at the initial addition back in July, one of the questions the staff posed was just whether the addition should meet the current requirements for the 75% masonry, or if we should allow them to follow the building materials percentages of the existing building, so that it looked like it was, would blend in with what they have, because it's a relatively new building. It was approved back in 2013, so it's not that old. And the commission was favorable toward allowing to continue with what they have done with the existing building, because the addition really is in kind of a non-visible location, and having 75% masonry on an existing building that doesn't have that kind of proportionality might look a little out of place and actually compromise what we're trying to do with the architectural design standards. So as long as y'all are okay with this addition here, in that regard, the only comment that the staff had was from the fire marshal, and I've talked with Chris about it, it's real minor, it's just to add a striping for a fire lane at this end of this turnaround, just to make sure that doesn't get where people are parking there, obstructed. So that's a very easy correction. Everything else was addressed, so the staff would recommend approval subject to that being added to the revised site plan.
I make a motion that we accept the request to maintain the percentage of the original structure subject to the fire lane matter.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on the site plan revisions involving building elevations and the percentage of masonry provided in association with the overlook at Campbell Station Apartments. Parcel 108 and 109, tax map 130, zone R-6, OSMFR 820 North Campbell Station Road, 31.94 acres, GBS Engineering applicants.
Okay, at our meeting last month, we reviewed a updated site plan. There was a couple of utility modifications, and then one of the questions we also raised was that since the site plan that was approved back in January of 2016 never really was approved because the subject twos were never addressed, whether the project needed to meet the masonry percentage requirements that we have in place now in our design standards, 75% masonry on all new buildings, or if they would be held to the requirements that were in place when it was approved in 2016. So the commission felt like that they would be held to those original percentages, which was 75% masonry on the first floor minimum, 60% on the building's total, and that's what's presented in your packet in the color renderings. This is kind of a site layout. Betty, you'd asked about having this in there just to orient you just on how this fits in. But this is Campbell Station Road up here. And the first building, the building that has what they're talking about with their iconic element would be that building that's visible from Campbell Station Road. The clubhouse would be in this area. So when you look at the different buildings, and sometimes it's hard to tell with these color renderings and, you know, what it's going to actually look like when it gets built, but we'll scroll through some of these. But the tower feature that they talked about last month, because there was also the question about whether at least the building that was visible from North Campbell Station Road had an iconic element to it, and that was what these towers were being designed to address. So that's that. And let me scroll through the next slide. We'll just go through each of these. They do meet the old masonry percentages. I don't know if you all were able to bring any samples, guys, or not, or if you had anything you wanted to say, but they have demonstrated, because remember last month there was kind of a different things thrown around, and so what we asked them to do was just, you know, give us a consolidated building elevation set of what they actually are wanting to do, and so that's what they've done with this submittal. And if y'all have any questions, I'm sure they would be happy to try to answer those. But all the buildings do meet the old masonry percentages.
Each one of them, or just the whole? Each
building,
building meets it,
yeah.
or the whole?
Each building meets the individual of the old standards, yes.
Can you give us a name and business name and address? And
Yes, good evening. I'm John Gumpert. I'm with Camden Partners in Atlanta. My address is 4770 South Atlanta Road in Atlanta. And I'm part of the development team.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Or you want to let him show us what he's got
some
first?
building material samples. I think we talked about that last.
Yeah, since
month
our
as
last
well.
meeting, we've actually brought in a different component of our design team to actually select the brick, stone, and paint colors. This is a $37 million development. About $1.5 million to $8 million is on exterior masonry. So it's a substantial part of our budget. It's a substantial investment in the project. So we are taking that seriously, and we're trying to come up with an important color palette on the exterior of the building.
How many total units are going to be in this project?
It's 263. I'm sorry, 267. Sure.
Was that 11 or 12 buildings, was it?
It's 10 buildings, ma'am. 10 buildings.
10 buildings?
10 buildings. The clubhouse, and there's a maintenance facility / car wash facility that's also in Clort. It's another building that's shown in the elevations.
So 3 more
No, there's a maintenance / car wash building
together.
yes.
Yeah, that's the maintenance building.
And then the clubhouse?
And the
Clubhouse
clubhouse,
is there.
and there's a gazebo associated with it.
Number 12.
Well, there's a total of actually about 13 buildings if you want to count the gazebo for the pool building. And my name's Mark Bollick. I'm GBS Engineering, 1313 Cal Me, and I'll beat you to it, Ruth.
As much as you're here, you ought to know that.
Well, y'all should know me by now.
Well, that's true, we do.
That's the color in between. Is that what they're going to do?
And the towers are just going to be on that one building. The rest of them will not have the towers?
That's right.
And I assume that's the mortar color? Is that the
Yes.
mortar color?
Yes.
I like that. Mortar color.
It just.
Are those mailboxes at the clubhouse?
At this moment in time, yes, but we're also exploring the opportunity, maybe making them into a separate thing so that you don't have so many people trying to get into one spot. Yeah, we're looking at that, but that would be a minor tweak to the site plan. But we haven't totally solved that problem yet. But yes, at this moment right now, the clubhouse has some mailboxes at it too. Yes.
How often will you have to, I assume you'll have to paint the, what is that, hardy board? What is the?
Yes, hardy plank.
Hardy plank. How often will you have to paint that? Do you know?
You know, I think every 7 years or so.
Okay.
It's a little better than wood, but you still have to repaint it.
I think that's going to give you a classic look.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
All the rest is maintenance-free?
Yes.
I agree, and that's my concern, is that it looks nice in 10 years, that it still has a nice classic look that
I think that's a
doesn't look dated in 10 years. That's the,
traditional classic brick.
Anybody in the
the
audience?
concern.
Make it really look solid.
Like I say, we're happy with it. It's a big investment. I mean, the masonry is not, so we're spending a lot of other people's thought on what the best color selection is. So I don't get a vote in that.
Has this developer, does this developer have other similar projects elsewhere?
Yes, in fact, we've got one called River's Edge in Knoxville, a very similar design.
How old is it?
We finished it a year and a half ago or so.
That's the only other one?
It's the only other one here in Knoxville. We've got a number of historic buildings we've redone and are doing, and we've got a number of, our collective group has quite a few projects.
So do you continue to own those?
Yes, in fact, the first project that I did in Knoxville was 18 years ago, and I still own that.
So we're not prone to sell then?
No, but I mean, that's, you know, they can always be sold, just the ones that I've done, I've not
My
sold.
concern is the maintenance of them long-term.
Well, this project is designed to
So
be
large.
truly a Class A project. It's got granite countertops, beautiful cabinets, and you can look at the last project I did on the South Side River, and it'll be to that standard, and that's a great standard. I mean, we're 100% occupied.
What's the address of that? River Edge, did you say?
Yeah, 1701 Island Home Avenue.
It's just to the west of entrance to Island Home, if you've been down there along the water.
Yes, exactly to the west of it.
Yeah. It's a nice area down there.
Now, we're very pleased with it. You can see the river walk we built to complement that, and it's just wonderful.
Louise just showed me on her phone the River Edge there. I noticed all those air conditioning units there in the front. Is that the way this is going to be?
Yes, yes. Yeah, they will be screened. Your ordinance has them screened.
We require them to be screened.
I don't have any other questions.
Anybody else have any
Ready to see it
questions?
develop.
And we have no subject twos with this, Mark?
Not on the building elevations, no.
Okay.
That's all that came back to us, right? Was the
Yeah,
building
that's all
elevations?
we needed to look at, was just the building elevations, as far as y'all's formal.
In regards
action,
to, Mark, let me address this. In regards to the other subject twos from last month, we've addressed some of those. They're not all 100% done yet. I'm still working to try and get the first utility approvals. I'm working with First Utility daily, trying to get that done. And then there's the issue of the drainage fee and the letter of credit and the little fury. And I've got to call into Dan Johnson about some of his comments that I want to make sure I get them addressed properly so that we can do this all staff oriented. It doesn't have to come back in front of Planning Commission. And we are aware that those issues still are outstanding. We have to take care of them as quick as possible.
Anybody else, questions, comments?
When do you expect to break ground?
Mark, you said the difference is.
Wait a minute. We got
in
one
the-
here.
Go ahead.
Elevations would be reviewed in more detail at the meeting. I couldn't read, I tried to pull that up, and I couldn't read that.
Zoom in on it.
What,
Could you
yeah,
zoom in on
what
it?
the, it was
That's
really
why I
dim for
emailed
me.
it to y'all so you could zoom in on it in PDF on
I
your
tried,
computer.
yeah.
And it wouldn't do it. Pretty much, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I reviewed, the ground, the first floor is pretty much 100% brick on all the
All
buildings.
first floors are 100% brick.
And I think the rest of the building is probably 60% at least.
The lowest number, if I remember correctly, Mark, the lowest number is 60%. Most of them are close to 65 to 70%,
So, yeah, it's.
except for the clubhouse, which is almost 100%.
Clubhouse looks nice.
Yeah, the clubhouse is.
It
it's a nice
highlighted
looking
in the
building.
email I sent you all where they, and it is a little bit hard to follow, but
Yeah.
where the changes were made from, I guess, was in the packet last month, where you did show compliance with their current requirements.
Did you send them the one with all the clouds?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
and that's why I emailed it to y'all, so you could zoom in and out, because it was impossible to look at it
I
on
tried, but
paper.
maybe I just didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And Ed, your question?
Yes.
With the, coming up on the good season or whatever, you still got a few things to
Yeah,
knock
well,
out
actually,
first.
that
You're
was,
really gonna have to break ground next, spring.
that was the question.
Right.
That answer, your question begs me a question. I would like permission, and we've asked this in an email per required by town staff, to allow us to start setting up the erosion control and clearing while we're doing these little bit of I-dot and T-cross and stuff, so that once we have it all 100% done, we'll be off and running. We would like permission to go ahead and put up the tree protection fence, the erosion control measures, and start clearing the property starting tomorrow, if at all possible.
We don't do that because we always require a stamped approved set of plans. That would be inconsistent with our practice. Plus, we'd have to have the letters of credit in place before you do any disturbance.
Well, I understand that. I understand the
on the
letters of credit
property.
and the drainage fee would have to be paid.
Yeah.
We have a notice of commencement from TDEC. We would just like the ability to
We
start.
need to treat them exactly like we do anybody else. So
I don't want to set a precedent here for
Yeah.
down the road.
you need to get that worked out with First Utility, and then any other subject twos need to be addressed so that we have a stamped approved set. That's,
Well, again, can't blame a guy for asking.
yeah. I don't blame you for asking. I just,
No, and I understand your point.
But as soon as we get that done, we'd be able to submit and get that.
as soon as you get your plans stamped and approved, and get your letter of credit in and drainage fee, I think that's the main things I can recall. And part of that is getting FUDs to sign off on your utility sheets,
and
as
that's-
you know.
Trust me, that's not the hardest thing in the world, but it's just time and effort to get done, yes.
Yep.
And they don't have to come, there's no coming back to the planning commission.
Unless there's some
something-
significant change that I'm unaware of, I
No.
hope not.
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask this question. While we're standing here, if we happen to find a way to move the mailboxes to a little freestanding facility, does that have to come back in front of the planning commission?
I don't
I would-
know. I mean, I
think
wouldn't
so.
think so.
You don't think
Personally,
so?
I wouldn't think so, but
Well,
I
if-
need
and
to
that's-
see what you're talking about.
Well, obviously, no, we're talking about just
You
a
know.
small covered area for mailboxes that's not attached to the clubhouse.
I mean, we can take a look at it, and if we feel that
Staff make a
it's,
decision whether they need to, but I'm
Yeah.
willing to trust the staff.
That's
unless
fine.
They feel compelled.
I mean, if it looks
That's fine.
like something that's of concern, then we would bring it back to you all.
Okay,
But I
but-
think if it's pretty much a no-brainer, I don't know what the point would be.
Okay, that's,
You know.
that's all I wanted to know.
So let's say if we get what's shown approved, we want to make a change, we'll get staff's approval or we won't make a change.
I was
Well, it
just
depends
more
on-
concerned about the traffic jam, where the placement's shown now.
Well, I think that's something we look at the staff level. And I don't think they would want to create a problem either with circulation. I mean, I think
Well,
that'd
and
be a,
and as far as anything else, it depends on what you're talking about.
No,
With-
the only thing that I know of right now that we're even discussing is possibly detaching the mailboxes from the clubhouse to put in a little green space area that we already have set up. That would be more centrally located for everybody to get to. And get, like she was saying,
That might be more appropriate if you had a drive-through, at least if you
Yeah.
could drive through.
yeah, well, we'll work on it. That's something that we're looking into. We haven't really decided what we're going to do yet. I just want to make certain, if it's a no-brainer, that doesn't have to come back in front of y'all again.
I don't want it to come back again.
no, unless it's a
I want you guys
significant
to get
change, we
started.
won't.
We want to start too.
know
This will
you
be
do.
something after we get dirt moving. How's that?
I think good need for something of this quality.
Yes.
So, interested in getting on with it.
Have we voted? We
Have a motion?
move to approve. The facade is what we're moving to approve, right?
That's it. Yeah.
That's
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you and good luck.
Thank you. John.
Discussion and public hearing on the Campbell Station Inn Phase 3 concept plan at 11401 Kingston Pike.
Been an interesting planning commission tonight. Jeez. Been a Eric area.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gary Palmer, Assistant Town Administrator. Get set here. And if it's okay, I would just like to read this into the record, just for completeness. The town's been working with Brewery and Fuller, architectural firm in Knoxville, over the past couple of years on renovating the Campbell Station Inn. If you're not familiar, it's the house that's located on the northwest corner of Kingston Pike and Campbell Station. We completed Phase 1, the hazmat abatement, this past year, and now we're into Phase 2, which is the stabilization of the inn. And if you recall, back at your May 18th meeting, David Smoke presented the CIP. And during that program presentation, this was one of the projects that was presented and subsequently approved by the Planning Commission and the board. In talking with the design team and going through the concept plan and that whole planning process, our thought was we should bring this back again for one more time for you guys to look at it as a plan, a single project, before we delve into Phase 3 design. Give you an opportunity to take a look at it, and we're going to recommend that you approve the plan. But anyway, I'd like to finish reading this into the record and open it up for discussion if it's okay with you. So during the Phase 3, we're going to grade the site, construct the Kingston Pike decel lane, construct the bisecting access drives onto Village Green, into Village Green Shopping Center and Campbell Station Inn. We're going to install the sidewalks, the parking lot pavers, all the hardscape, all the landscaping, exterior bathroom facilities, and the town plaza. Project team includes the following staff members who have reviewed this concept plan in detail in accordance with our adopted policies, our guidelines, and their own professional standards. And on that team is Sue Stool, Bart Hose, Mark Shipley, Daryl Smith, David Sparks, Bud McKelvey, John Householder, Dan Johnson, myself, and the Brewer Ingram Fuller team. Again, just wanted to bring this back to you for one more shot at the plan. We will have a contract before the board for the Phase 3 design with Brewer Ingram Fuller probably within the next month. So again, just wanted to give it another opportunity to take a look at it and take your comments before we start doing the planning for Phase 3. And if you have questions about the other phases, what's going on, I can answer those as well.
Where is this coming in from Kingston Pike? Is there?
Where the existing access is. Yeah, we're going to convert that to right in, right out at the decel lane. And you can see the roadways will bisect up and go into the Village Green Shopping Center parking lot.
Is that going to require a bridge or fill, or what is that? Is that a drainage way?
Where are we talking?
Towards the back, when you connect to, isn't there a big?
It's going to need regrading, but okay. No, we're not going to need to do a bridge.
Okay.
Where are the exterior bathroom facilities located, Gary, on here?
Let me see if I can zoom in on this.
Over here, right behind the building. To mark.
I'll try to show you on the screen up there. I don't think I can zoom in, but the bathroom facility is going to be located right in there, that building right there.
This building right here is the bathroom facility.
That's standalone?
Standalone. It'll be heated but not air conditioned. And it will be architecturally compatible with the rest of the building.
Hot water?
It will.
So are we making a motion? Are we approving this?
I'm looking for approval of the concept plan. Now, we're going to return with the site plan. We've been discussing about platting this, so I think we'll probably return to do the platting. So you're going to see this again, but I wanted to get some sort of approval before we give the green light to Brewer Ingram Fuller and spend money on the design.
I'm sorry that I'm not as familiar with some of these others with this, but where are the parking lot pavers?
This all the gray area on there, that's all going to be permeable pavers. Yes,
It's
ma'am.
going to be pavers. Boy, that's a lot of pavers, isn't it?
A lot of pavers.
So
This phase tears down the existing old building behind?
The milk barn will be torn down during the stabilization phase, which will probably occur in the spring.
Next spring, okay.
So phase 3 is just going to be everything outside of the house. All the grading.
Inside the paved area, the future phase is for later.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a building someday.
So the future phase, when we're done with phase 3, will just be a green space.
Okay.
And you can see we've added sidewalks up the access ways, and there's some on-street parking out there. So it'd be a good place for us to have, town events and functions out there.
Refresh my memory on what the dollar projection is for that phase 3.
Well, phase 3, we budgeted $2 million.
$2 million.
Right.
That's what I would have
And
guessed.
a lot less, but I doubt it.
Gary, would you point out the exterior bathroom again? I missed it.
Yeah, let me see if I can zoom in on this. Mark, can we zoom in on this? No, I just screwed it up. I don't know if you can turn around and see that, Betty. It's right there. You can't see it because it's got a little cluster of trees there, but it's just a very small outbuilding just outside of the back of the house.
Okay, thank you.
There's 2 bushes right there.
Does anybody else have anything?
How will access be to that, Gary?
I'm sorry?
How do you envision access to the exterior bathroom facility?
I mean, there'll be a sidewalk up to it,
But I
and
mean, will it be locked and you have to
it'll be
obtain
just
a
like our
key,
park
or-
bathrooms.
Yeah.
Do they lock the park bathrooms up there?
Yes.
So it'll
So
be
that the
locked
public in general is not going to access it?
during the day.
Yeah,
It'll be open. It'll
During the
it'll be
day.
locked like our park bathrooms after dark. I think they
Okay.
lock it, yeah.
Don't they do that remotely now? Is there?
I'll be honest with you, Rita, I don't know.
No.
It'd be cool if they did. Yeah, I don't think we're that advanced. Unless you're in it. But we spent a lot of time with this. We've done a lot of work on it. I personally think it's a very cool plan. And I'm looking forward to progressing through this. Once we get the wings this winter, just to give you an idea what's going to go on with the stabilization, they're going to remove the wings from the building, and they've got to tuck point the entire structure. What they found when they went in there is that the mortar is so old and so bad that it basically is just sand once they take it apart. So they're going to have to tuck point every mortar joint on that whole building. Obviously, that's going to take a substantial amount of time. Then the building's got to sit for about a month. They can't do anything on site. Just let it sit, let that mortar set up, and then they'll come back in and do all the weatherization, stabilize the buildings, and the last thing we're going to do is probably take down the milk barn. So once you see that coming down, that'll probably be around the end of phase 2. We should be wrapped up with everything, hopefully before this time next year. But I think we projected on our project manual, it's out for bid right now, phase 2. So we're projecting that to be done August 31st. Or sooner.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm excited to see this happen. It's going to make that corner really beautiful, so.
I make a motion that we approve your concept of this phase 3 and submit it on to the board.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Be able to catch you before that. We didn't plan on taking it to the board unless, I'll talk to David about it. If the board wants it and David wants to take it there, we'll take it and we'll turn that into a recommendation to approve. But I'm just looking for you guys for a straight approval of concept plan.
Oh, okay, then I'll revise it to omit the part that I said about submitting to the board. I thought you said you wanted to submit it to the board.
Well,
Yeah.
3 of them are here tonight, so.
Do we need to?
Good.
Ended motion?
I think we're good. And we'll be back with the site plan and the plat, so you'll see this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on updates to the sinkhole ordinance. And we went over this last week.
I'll turn
Or
this
last
over
month,
to the resident sinkhole expert,
Last week.
Bart Hose. Hold on 1 minute.
they all
He
run
actually
together.
knows some things rather than me, and I just make up stuff.
Hi, I'm Bart Hose, the Assistant Community Development Director at Town of Farragut. I'm here for the proposed amendments to the town sinkhole ordinance. And as the chairman said, this is something that you reviewed at the last Planning Commission meeting, these proposed amendments. Since that time, we've made a few additional changes. We added some provisions into the original language to allow both the Planning Commission and staff to refer certain drainage issues onto the Town Stormwater Advisory Committee for input from that board. That was something that came out of discussion at the last Planning Commission meeting. We also had to go in and clarify a flooding and minimum floor elevation issue that came out of another variance request that was heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals. That involved adding some language, to deal with that and sort of clarify the way that's applied within the ordinance. And then finally, we've submitted the draft language to the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, to Dr. Peter Leminski, and he's their chief geologist. He's reviewed the draft ordinance. He was quite supportive of it. He did have a few comments, and we've addressed some of those, although we're still working to clarify two things with him. We tried to contact him today and just weren't able to get him. They're really issues of being able to clarify some language, so we don't anticipate them being large changes to the ordinance. So what we've done is we've put it in ordinance form for you to act on and recommend on to the town board if you see fit, and also a resolution taking that action, which is what the Planning Commission would actually be approving. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer about the changes we've made or any of the work we've been doing on it. But
And you said the shaded area kind of doesn't show up as well, but
yeah, it didn't.
that's the changes actual.
Yeah, and I tried to
issues.
put some comment notes in there just to give you a heads up as to what our thinking was in those areas and why we made those changes. Again, we're working with TDEC to just clarify 2 points, but we don't see them being really large issues. If it was something that was substantial or to change the intent, we'd bring it back to you. But at this point, we think it's in pretty good shape, and we'd like to get it in front of the town board for actual adoption. It might be a little confusing if you're comparing it to what you looked at the last meeting, because the town's also in the process of adopting its recodified municipal code. So we had to go in and essentially renumber the entire thing and reorder it to match the way the town ordinance book is going to be done now. So it was something we just had to totally basically reorganize the ordinance. So it's a little different than what you looked at last meeting.
So you'll have, if there's any language change, you'll have it before it goes to the board.
Yeah, and it's an ordinance amendment, so they'll have to do it through 2 readings. So if there was something that
Okay.
was more substantial, we could bring it back to the Planning Commission prior to their final reading and public hearing and that sort of thing on it. So.
I have a comment, Bart.
Sure.
I see that in 107-651, that the Board of Zoning Appeals is currently the case, serves as the appellate body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm understanding that we might, as a planning commission, get a shot at any thing here through the site plan review, but it's just not clear to me. Look at number 3, that you've added there.
Mm-hmm.
How it says whenever the town staff and our planning commission determines that an appeal, that sounds to me like that we're going to be looking at it anytime there is an appeal. I'm not sure how the planning commission gets a hold of this.
Okay. One of the things that that prompted this ordinance change to begin with is the provisions that we've added to section 107 /68, which are the general requirements. They start over on page 3 of the highlighted, and they continue on over to page 4. And really, the whole purpose here was to allow, for the limited filling of sinkholes in some, very narrow circumstances.
Yes.
One of those would be if the planning commission was juggling sort of competed public policy issues. So in that sort of,
How does it ever get to the planning commission to start with?
well, if a sinkhole was discovered as part of a site planning process, then you might be faced with that. And prior to making a decision under that change, you'd be able to send it to the Stormwater Advisory Committee to get input before you decided whether or not to allow some filling of a sinkhole. So,
But wasn't the issue before, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought the issue was before with the Board of Zoning Appeals that they thought that it had to go to a court, not us,
well, the Board of Zoning Appeals was asked to
in that limited situation.
Yeah, they were asked to rule on a variance request to allow filling, and they felt at the
Right.
time that the language in the ordinance was so specific that they felt that they would essentially be amending the ordinance and not just granting a simple variance. So they thought the fix needed to be legislative, and
Right.
so part of the legislative fix is to build in some flexibility. So rather than it having to go to a variance,
So
as the
this is
planning
supposed to be the legislative fix.
Well, yeah. So
Okay.
this is amending the ordinance to provide the flexibility, and part of that flexibility would be that the planning commission would get to review certain types of requests and make that determination as to whether or not
Okay,
a
now
site plan
kind of
should be
guide me
approved.
through that then. Under 10768, the general requirements, I see under number 3, when the filling is requested, right? Filling of a sinkhole.
Yeah.
I still don't see how it's where it says that it goes to the planning commission.
On C, if you turn it over, that's where it goes to the planning commission.
But it says the planning commission has determined. I mean, how does it ever get there for us to
From
determine it?
from a site review,
Yeah.
site plan.
Yeah, the planning commission, when it's reviewing either a subdivision plat or a site plan, for that matter, if, when the developers are first submitting their things, they have to, provide topographic information, they have to provide the natural features on the site. If as part of that process, which is part of your review process for either a subdivision plat or a site plan, if a sinkhole is identified, it's noted and located on either the site plan or the subdivision plat. So,
Well, I guess I would say that it would be clearer to me if C said, if upon review of a site plan or whatever language you want to put in there, the planning commission has determined, then, I'd be happy, because then I know how it gets to the planning commission. But it's not clear to me, but that's okay if everybody else.
Well, that's the
is
only
clear.
way it would go through that's a natural course of events that's like tonight, we had that, the one on Concord Road, that has a sinkhole on it. That would have come to us with a site plan with the sinkhole. And if that sinkhole, and I'll go back to the Dollar General because that's where it was, that corner of that sinkhole is so not part of the major part of that. If that had shown up on the site plan and we had a chance to discuss it at that point, we would have possibly been able to resolve it. This language gives us the opportunity to resolve it at that
Exactly.
point where they wouldn't.
Yeah, and I understand that. Okay.
But go back to number
I give
3, 107-653.
653?
Brought up. To me, I'm a little bit confused on the fact that we have this ability to request, that the Stormwater Advisory Committee look at it, and then the way I read it, they're going to make recommendations to the BZA. They're not coming back to us.
well,
That's what I understand.
Yeah, and
Right,
it-
so how does
I
it
thought that
ever
was
get
the
there?
point. I thought that was your point. That
No, not partially,
Okay.
partially.
I think part of it too is that is the ordinance is a little more confusing now with the new layout because all the appeals information is up front in the ordinance, and typically we used to put it at the end of an ordinance. So you went through the whole approval and review process for a site plan or subdivision or that sort of thing, and you know, all of the standards and requirements were up front, so you could see the linkage better between the
I
planning
think you're
commission
right.
and that sort of thing, and appeals were at the back, but again, this is the way they laid out most of the ordinances in the new code book, so we sort of reordered this ordinance, and now, now you're talking about how do you appeal a decision before the process of even getting to the decision. But, yeah, so I
If everybody
I can
else is
understand
clear
that
with it, that's
confusion.
okay.
I have some concerns about the filling of sinkholes. The limited filling of sinkholes is very vague to me.
yeah.
Should there not be some more concrete data in here to identify limited filling?
What is limited? Yeah.
I'm not sure how we'd be able to do that, because I think each proposal would be, I guess, unique, and to be able to set a percentage that that would just, you'd almost be amending the ordinance on a regular basis depending on what the proposal would be. I mean, we tried to make it very, very tight so that it would be the limit. It would be the minimum necessary to accomplish the project, but then even then only after you as a public body have decided that it's an important enough project to even contemplate doing it in the first place.
Well, in a massive
Discretion.
sinkhole, obviously you got to fill the whole thing, I would think, but maybe not.
Well, no, not necessarily. And a good example is the Dollar General, where we were really dealing with just a piece of a sinkhole that extended, from the south side of Kingston Pike to the north side of Kingston Pike. So most of the sinkhole was actually on the south side of the road, and there was just a small portion that was remaining on the north side. So, it would have just been that section on that particular project that would have had fill in it.
Okay.
In that respect.
It's probably highly likely there's one on the lot next door. So is this going to interfere with that?
Again, if this was approved, that was one of the things that we discussed at the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting when that was heard, is that it would make no sense for them to grant a variance on the one piece of property without fully expecting to have to do it on the adjoining piece of property. And so again, they felt like it needed to be addressed through changes in the ordinance and not just, them granting variances.
Right, we're addressing it on paper, but not in the physical part, as I understand it. It looks like to me. Anyway.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it was something that we tried to put a lot of, we realized that we were potentially opening the door to something that, we're not, we don't want to see happen very often. So we did try to then go in and build in, some fairly strict requirements that even if you, as the planning commission, were to consider it, there'd still be a number of hoops to jump through. Like it would have to get TDEC approval. They would have to hire either a licensed geologist or a geotech engineer to, fully evaluate it and put together some sort of mitigation plan. So we realized that we were opening the door, and then so we tried to keep it from opening too much, for lack of a better term.
You just mentioned something that I thought needed to be added to A and B of that, and that was the town staff, and I'd really rather see shall seek additional review and approval from Planning Commission, Stormwater Advisory Commission, and professional geologist or geotechnical engineer. Include those in A and B.
What?
And be of which
The
section?
filling sinkholes.
Okay.
107683.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do that there if you just want that added in. That under, really probably should have labeled them or numbered that differently, and I may change that, but down below item C, in all cases where fill construction is permitted, it does address the geotech under there. So A, B, C, D, and E would all apply to anything that fell under the first A, B, and C. And I probably should change that to like little I or smaller numbers to make it clear. That's sort of a numbering mistake on my part, and I'll clarify that a little bit. I think it'll be clearer that way. But but if you felt more comfortable, we could put that language in up above too, or suggest it to the town board.
I don't really see it's all that tight, but I guess if I were on the other end of having a building or finding a sinkhole on my property, it might feel differently. But it really doesn't look all that tight to me. I do have another question. On page 6 of 7, under 6, building construction in sinkhole areas and sinkhole drainage areas. Let's see, third paragraph from the bottom. Structural engineer must approve all building foundations constructed within sinkhole areas except when the planning commission has reduced the required building setback in accordance with the subdivision.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to be making a decision on a geological problem such as that. I can see after we have expert advice that we can reduce the required, but not before.
And I did try to clarify that a little bit in an updated draft based on a comment from TDEC, and that statement all falls under subsection 6 there, which is up above, and you already had that authority under the existing ordinance where there's a minimum 50-foot building setback line that's set at the time of sinkhole determination, which is defined by the ordinance, and that occurs when you're either dealing with a subdivision plat or a site plan, like we were talking this morning or earlier in the meeting. And there are provisions in there for you to already modify that. And so we didn't see any reason to have a structural engineer approving or having to approve the building foundations if you've already had either a geotech or a geologist come in and give you the information that you've made the decision to reduce the 50-foot building setback. So we thought it was sort of superfluous to require
Another structure, another layer.
Yeah, sort of an extra layer, because you wouldn't have reduced the 50-foot setback on the front end when it was originally platted or put on a site plan, unless you met the conditions of A, B, C, and D, and one of those is to have all that data on the front end. So,
okay.
And that was already in the ordinance, so that's not something that we changed as part of this. The only thing we did change was just put in that except, the except half of that sentence.
But we're deleting the present ordinance.
Yeah, in its entirety, but we're putting back a lot of the language that was already in the ordinance. It was, rather than try to amend it piecemeal, a sentence here or a paragraph there, what we did is we're just, taking the whole thing out and putting the whole thing back in, but that's not to say that we changed all of the language. We a good part of this ordinance, was the original language.
I went through both. I'm just not clear where.
So you're saying for the structure of this ordinance, this appeals process needs to be where it is rather than logically at the end?
We just reorganized our ordinances.
Yeah. Yeah, so
I don't know why we did that like
I
that.
don't know either.
So the entire new, a municipal code book, most of the ordinances in there now take this format. So we put this one in this
So be
format.
prepared to be irritated.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
Question about the terminology, and this gets back maybe to some other overarching part of our ordinances. We use the term, licensed engineer, professional geologist, geotechnical engineer, what have you. Is it defined earlier that that's, we're meaning in the state of Tennessee?
No, but I can put that in. That's a good point.
Well, we've probably got language like that all through our ordinances, where we mention engineer or geologist or
We may,
architects or whatever, but I'm just wondering, is there an overarching thing so we don't have to say it everywhere? But this one kind of, well, what got me into looking at that was because we don't really talk about, I'll say where we added things like the professional geologist or geotechnical engineer, that doesn't appear in many places. And so.
No, it doesn't. In fact, we added
a lot of
those two
specialists,
things for this ordinance because
are not residing here, but they still have to be licensed here as well.
Okay, so
It's such a specialty.
yeah, I can add that easily. Just licensed in the state of Tennessee.
And the other thing, this is just a nit, but in 107673, where it talks about this in the number 3, the second line toward the end, it says qualified licensed professional geologist. I think you strike the word qualified. By definition, you have licensed, and then that expertise. It's just a superfluous word.
I would caution you against putting that language about in Tennessee here if you don't do it everywhere that it's mentioned.
Yeah, that's my point.
You need to be consistent because
We don't
it
have
could
it
be
in
interpreted
in a-
elsewhere if you don't
If we
have
don't
that
have it in some
language.
overarching part of our ordinances,
Yeah, if
we
it's
need to have
yeah,
that.
if you've got a.
We can
something
ask
similar.
the town attorney about that and just make sure, that we wouldn't, I think, yeah.
Like I say, there's such a specialty in certain things we're getting into that sometimes that's not maybe a whole suite of what's available locally, so they go out of state. But a lot of those folks are licensed in multiple states too.
Yeah, but you've put it here, Ed, then if it's
No,
not.
I'm
put,
agreeing with you.
Okay,
That's what
all right.
that was kind of my initial point. Did we have it?
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
No, it's backwards.
Just when you think you're making it easier, get easier.
Motion?
I thought he's going to bring back some changes in wording to us.
Well, he's, the wording, he thinks that, you mean at the beginning of the discussion, we were talking about just some, it wasn't a change in the meaning, it was just, you guys are consulting with,
Numbering and all.
by the time it gets to the board, whatever changes they might have to make, they will have made, is what he was saying.
But that's your prerogative.
I don't.
If you want to wait to the next meeting until we've, fully, I'm finished consulting with TDEC, that's okay too. It's totally your prerogative.
I move we wait till the next meeting.
Okay.
Is that fairly well the consensus of the planning commission to wait and get the updated information?
We're not holding up anything. Right? Except
Are
just
we
getting it
holding
off
up
Bert's-
anything?
Bert's plate, right?
Well, what's going on with Dollar General?
We might need to do something on the Dollar General question.
I'm
Well,
gonna,
they amended their site plan to avoid the sinkhole, pending the resolution of this issue. So
is this gonna hold them up, though?
It won't hold them up, but they need to get some direction on getting those connections across the frontage.
So if,
The ordinance modification, that direction would be lacking.
so we would just, by pushing it out a month, we're not gonna, we are or we're not?
We could always require them to provide a letter of credit for completion of things that we would want to have done, but it couldn't be done legislatively at this point. Allows for
Is the parking lot,
up their project, they could get a certificate of occupancy with the understanding that they would have a complete letter of credit that would require them to make those connections of walking trail and access to these. So it wouldn't hold up the project, you could do it.
is the parking lot going to affect the drainage into the sinkhole?
Parking lot that they're showing on the plan,
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be paved, isn't it?
I think
Yeah.
that
It's
area,
going to be all permeable.
no, it'll be a paved parking lot. go in and fill, that put those accesses across, they're gonna have to address the provisions in our ordinance and what we usually provided. They're gonna have to address all those requirements.
Gary, do you have a
I
comment?
just want to make a comment about logistics with where we're at now and with the schedule. If it comes back to the planning commission, it probably won't get to the board. They're only having one meeting in November and December. So there's a little concern about that delay.
That's a good point.
I couldn't hear everything in the back. I'm not sure what the hangup is, I guess.
Is it, there were two comments that TDEC had made back to us, and we just weren't able to get those comments clarified, prior to the meeting. It doesn't seem like it'd be a big deal to make the changes, but we wanted to make sure that we were properly understanding what the comment was before we made the change. Didn't see it as,
Would you
making the-
anticipate having response back relatively soon? Or
Yeah,
do you know?
left them a voicemail today, and they just weren't able to get back to us today. So I imagine, we'll probably hear back from them in the next couple of days. Is it something, Gary, that they could send it on to the board for first reading, with the understanding that that they would get to see any changes between now and the second reading?
I think that's been our practice. A lot of times Mark will send you guys stuff in the interim, if you guys are comfortable
We
with
could
that.
approve it just subject to the input you get not being significant enough to send back to us.
Sure.
Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, I think so. Does that sounds like it would
Yeah,
work?
I just don't want to see us holding this up.
Yeah.
Recommend approval of the
Motion on the
revision
floor.
here.
It may die from a lack of a second.
Pardon?
It may die from a lack of
I'm
a
sorry.
second, but there is a motion on the floor.
Okay, excuse me, I didn't know you had one.
So can we amend that motion, or what do you do?
No, my motion was to bring it back next month. Get a clean ordinance and come back next month.
Oh, that was a motion. Oh, I didn't.
I didn't understand
I
it was
said
a
I
motion
moved
either.
to.
Second?
No.
I didn't hear.
Can you do you want to withdraw your motion? or
No,
do
it
you-
can die from a lack of a second.
Okay.
So then, do I
Now
have,
we're there.
Make your motion.
Okay.
You're on.
I make a motion that we accept this amendment to the, actually, it's not an amendment, it's a restatement, isn't it, of the ordinance?
A whole new ordinance.
Restating the
Yeah.
whole thing, as you said, right?
Well, it would
Replacing.
Yeah, and amending, and basically what you're doing is you're recommending the ordinance onto the town board for adoption. So the
Right.
new proposed
Recommending
sinkhole ordinance.
Subject to the staff's determination that the input that you get concerning those comments is not significant, in your opinion, to bring back to the planning commission.
Okay.
Is that sufficient?
Sure.
And that's your motion, is you're moving to approve that
It's,
resolution.
to Resolution PC 17-11, which recommends approval of ordinance 17-15. Thank you.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So if we hear from you, it's, you've got something that's a little different, or much different from what, okay.
Yeah.
We get a clean copy next time?
Bart,
Oh, sure.
can we get a clean copy next time?
Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
Which one, I got to figure out which one is her. Oh, there it is.
Are we adjourned?
No, just, no. Nope, do we never have public utilities anymore? Okay,
Yeah, non-public.
yeah.
Put them on the agenda anymore.
Yeah, they don't put them on the agenda anymore. In that case, the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission, September the 21st, 2017 meeting is adjourned. I miss them for years.
Public utilities at the end.
They always put